Radio app.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
If former Clippers star Paul George decides to watch the NBA Finals, he can say he was a major factor in the Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers playing for a championship. George was traded by OKC in 2019 to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 5 first-round draft picks. OKC used 2 of those picks to select All-Star guard Jalen Williams and rookie guard Dylan Jones, a key player off the bench for OKC. In 2017, Indiana traded George to OKC for guard Victor Oladipo and center Domantas Sabonis. 2 years later, the Pacers used Sabonis in a trade with Sacramento to get Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton and Gilgeous-Alexander have their teams on the doorstep of an NBA championship. As for George, a 9-time All-Star, he's stuck with the Philadelphia 76ers team that is nowhere close to competing for an NBA title. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
One, two, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You ready?
Somebody make some noise in this joint.
KBLA Talk 1580 celebrates its 4th anniversary this year on Juneteenth.
Here we go again.
Hard to believe 4 years has gone by so fast.
Oh my God.
But here we are, still standing, still loving and serving our people as best we can.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
To celebrate our 4th anniversary, we have 4 big events, and you're invited to all of them.
She got a lot to say.
Let's do this.
Let's get it on.
On Wednesday, June 18th, we go live on C-SPAN for the 2nd consecutive year with our Climate Justice Plus Black Health Symposium. Tavis Smiley will moderate an all-star panel of thinkers and influencers as we continue our vitally important climate justice work.
Hey, Tavis Smiley, talk about.
On Thursday, June 19th, you're invited to join us as we celebrate Juneteenth and our 4th anniversary. There will be plenty of food, fun, great music, good vibes, and all of your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts will be there.
Yeah, man.
Hit the beat. On Saturday, June 21st, there are 2 big events you're invited to attend.
I can't wait to hear it.
This year, KBLA Talk 1580 continues its annual partnership with the Empowerment Congress for a community celebration and dialogue to educate, engage, and empower. This year's theme is Resilience in the Face of Chaos.
Can't wait to see what's up next.
Y'all ain't ready for this.
And new this year is our State of Black Women in Los Angeles Symposium, moderated by Dominique DePrima, with a luncheon to follow. Dominique will be leading a dialogue with some of the most impactful Black women leaders in Los Angeles, and you're invited to join.
This is it.
All of these events are free, but seating is limited, so you must register in advance at our KBLA1580.com website, where you can find all the details you need about each event.
Check it out.
It's our 4th anniversary, and we would love to celebrate it with you.
I love you guys so much. There's nothing you can do about it.
We're KBLA Talk 1580.
The only black talk radio station west of the Mississippi.
Thank you for having our black.
Happy anniversary, KBLA.
Love you. Love you.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest on this hump day is S. Todd Eury. Dr. Eury is principal of the Eury firm, a Maryland-based litigation and government relations firm, and also serves as the senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church of Baltimore and affiliates. Dr. Eury is also the former chief executive of the Rainbow Coalition, the international human rights, civil rights organization founded by my father. Dr. Eury, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Oh, it's hump day, and I'm ready to see what we're going to do. What we got?
We're going to jump right in. Just hung up with Abby Phillips a few minutes ago. CNN is going to deal today in part with the op-ed written by Warren Ballentine, Michael Cohen, Dr. Michael Jones, Rabbi Michael Rothenberg, and myself, Jesse Jackson Jr., to discuss the mental acuity of the president and whether or not it played a role in the denial of the pardon applications of thousands of Americans who sought a pardon while members of his family did not have to complete one. And he sprung it on the nation just 1 minute before his presidency ended. Obviously, there are questions about the auto pen. We got about 3.5 minutes before the break. Let's knock this one out so we can go on to other subject matters.
All right. So what do you want to start with is the fundamental question, right?
The fundamental question is whether or not the president's mental acuity was capable of truly looking at the pardon applications of millions of people who've paid their debt to society who need a pardon. Now, some might say, well, millions of people didn't fill out pardon applications, but neither did his family. And therefore, he did have the power, just as he did, to pardon members of his family without filling out a pardon application. He can pardon millions of people who paid their debt to society in full, which his family did not. That's the meat and the potatoes of the question. And whether or not there was a small group of white people, I don't want to say white people, a small group of people within the White House, that's what I meant to say, the White House, who were making judgments about the lives of other people in light of the so-called legacy of the President of the United States.
So I can't get to whether or not it's driven by the legacy of the former president, but let's just be real clear. The mental acuity of the president matters not one it when it comes to the power of the presidency. I've never seen, other than the invocation of the 25th Amendment, where there is some concern about the ability to function, or whether or not the president is capable of operating in that role. The High Court has never opined on that. We remember there was a similar scenario back when Ronald Reagan was president, and the joke used to be that Nancy was really running the country because he had the onset of dementia, and yet he was still operating as the president. I think what you get to is the fundamental question is mental acuity is one issue. But that's really the secondary issue. Some folks have to abide by a certain process by which their issue gets elevated to the awareness of the president. Others get the bypass of that process and just enjoy the use and the utility of the president's pardon power to their benefit. Of the J6 offenders, they did not apply for pardons. This new president gave blanket pardons to those who were impacted. And so you have kind of two contrasts. The pardon power of the president is so beyond really reach and scrutiny that the real question is what is the response when the president, whether it's the current president, the former president, or any other president prior to them, can really just kind of create a mechanism out of whole cloth that informs or doesn't inform how they're going to use that pardon power. That's, I think, the piece where we often leave the question of restorative justice off the agenda conversation when we start talking about who's going to sit in the Oval. And so there are two things. It's intriguing to know, yeah, we can all believe that he probably didn't have the mental acuity. Does it somehow change what the outcomes have been? Probably not. And this court is certainly not going to go back in retrospect and make any adjustments. And so we really have to figure out, how does this impact us? And the answer to the question is, so what? What are we going to do about it? That's where I think we've got to wrestle with the piece that is really still within our control, to be able to make sure that we don't get hustled again by whomever the president might be and whichever party might be in power.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We are going to pick back up on this when we come forward with a number of other issues with S. Todd Yeary. 1 foot in the courtroom and 1 foot in the pulpit. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Is reviewing life insurance on your to-do list? Now's the perfect time to add it. A friend recently told me that securing life insurance sooner rather than later can help you lock in lower rates for years to come. So I bumped this up on my list and got it done. I called SelectQuote and couldn't believe how easy and affordable life insurance is. I'm 40 and got a $500,000 policy for $16 a month. My husband's also 40 and his $500,000 policy was only $18 a month. Plus, with SelectQuote's same-day coverage, there was no medical exam required, and we were covered by the time we hung up. Knowing I have this checked off my list feels amazing, but the peace of mind knowing my family is protected feels even better.
Call SelectQuote at 1-800-729-7070. That's 1-800-729-7070. Or go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote today. That's 1-800-729-7070. Details on example rate at SelectQuote.com.
LA's newest soul food restaurant is getting spectacular reviews.
Great place with amazing food. The Sunday Champagne Brunch is fabulous. I saw the place on IG. We tried it for lunch. We were blown away by the food and the service. The restaurant has an inviting atmosphere and a dynamic vibe.
Over the years, Lionel has catered most major Black events in Los Angeles, including all of our KBLA Talk 1580 gatherings. But now he has his own spot, Lionel's Soul Food Cuisine, and you need to check it out at 8501 South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles. Oxtails, baked or fried chicken, meatloaf, turkey chops, pork chops, catfish, short ribs, and all the fixins. Collard greens, mac and cheese, yams, red beans, black-eyed peas, and more. And of course, hot water cornbread, satisfying drinks, and delicious desserts. Lionel's is a great place for brunch, lunch, or dinner. If it's good enough for us, it's good enough for you, because we've got your black. So head on over to Lionel's Soul Food Cuisine at 8501 South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles and tell Lionel you heard about it on KBLA Talk 1580. At the historic Second Baptist Church. Dr. Epps has faithfully served Second Baptist as its senior pastor for 37 years. What a legacy of love and leadership. Pastor and Mrs. Epps will be honored at a luncheon on Saturday, July 26, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Sheraton Universal Hotel in Universal City, and you're invited to attend. Noted scholar Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is the keynote speaker. For ticket information, please contact Epps Retirement at gmail.com or call 213-399-2103. That's Epps Retirement at
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica. KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. I do want to, Dr. Yeary, come right back into that question, what are we going to do about it? But before we get to that, because Joe Biden actually told us exactly what to do about it, I want to make a distinction for our listeners, and that's this. When Donald Trump entered the White House on January 20th, he issued a pardon for 1,500 people who ran into the Capitol on January 6th. He issued a full, complete, absolute, and unconditional pardon. And therefore, even though many of them were incarcerated, they are no longer felons. They have no record. There is no record that they even entered the Capitol. That is the power of the pardon. Joe Biden commuted the sentences of 30,000 low-level drug offenders, many of whom were in prison as a result of a crime bill that he helped usher through the Senate and through the Congress of the United States. And he gave them a commuted sentence, but he did not pardon them. The difference? The 1,500 people that Donald Trump pardoned do not have a criminal record. The offense never took place in the eyes of the law. The 3,000 people that Joe Biden commuted, today they are all felons. Time served, but they're walking around society with a stigma on their forehead that says, I used to sell pot. I used to smoke dope. I got caught with a dime bag. I got 5 on it. Whatever. They are felons because Joe Biden reprieved them, but he did not pardon them. And that begs the question that he pardoned members of his, and the Justice Department makes those 3,000 people wait 5 more years, just as they did me and Warren and Michael Cohen and others, before we can even fill out an application to ask for a pardon. So we wait 5 years in addition to what the judge gave us to do. And then we get in a long line waiting for Joe Biden's signature after we've spent 6 months working on these applications. To be told no, he pardons his family and they never filled out an application and were never charged with a single crime. They never got indicted. They never were accused of anything. He just gave them a pardon and they never filled out an application. What to do about it? The question before the break. As I turn it back over to you, Joe Biden says that on January 20th of 2025, in accordance with all of these procedures, that if you wish to reapply for a pardon, a new application form is now available through the Department of Justice. In other words, he said, go ask Donald Trump for a pardon because I'm out of here. Now, what happens, Dr. Yuri, if millions of Black folk in Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, and around our country decide to go ask Donald Trump for a pardon rather than waiting 4 more years of their life for the next Democrat to consider them at the end of 4 more years? That's 8 years away. That's the question. I think we follow Joe Biden's leadership and we ask Donald Trump.
Well, I think the issue is that we ask whoever's in the White House whenever
Absolutely.
they're there. It shouldn't be exclusive to one presumed favorable outcome from one side versus the other. At the end of the day, the game, as we've talked about before, is still monopoly, whoever's the banker. And that's basically what the presidency is. It is the administrative banker for white economic interest, which includes dealing with the lingering effects of conviction and or incarceration in these United States of America. And so it is incumbent upon us, if we're going to demand justice, it's not one-sided. We have to hold both sides accountable and make the demands whoever is in office, right? Because we don't know how long Donald Trump may or may not be in office, or who's going to be next. And this notion that somehow or other we're relegated to an optimal scenario where whether it's 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, whenever the parties switch in terms of who's the executive, that somehow or other it's going to lead to more favorable outcomes is just not borne out, right? Even when we look at the executive authority of the president, and I know we talked a bit about this earlier, that executive orders are just a president's whim about how federal law is going to be applied and federal regulations are going to be enforced. They get to decide, just like the banker in Monopoly, how we're going to play the game if, as we find ourselves today, the country or the bank runs out of money. And so there's always been an economic interest behind it. There's always been an economic interest to convict labor. There's been an economic interest to stifling and stymieing the ability of folks who have paid their debt to society, whatever that debt was and however convoluted it might have been, that somehow or other we get a pass. We've got to make the demand all day, all the time, whoever's there. And if they win the opportunity to have to look us in our faces and tell us why not.
Well, well, it couldn't be clearer, and I appreciate your moral voice on that. Let me use this opportunity to pivot to the idea of June, particularly a significant date in African-American history. The Emancipation Proclamation is issued on January 1st, 1863. 2 years later, Texas, sometime in June, about June 19th, actually gets the notification that the Negroes are free. 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, which, as you know, kept slavery in the states where Lincoln had control, but sought to free them, in part, civil wartime propaganda, in the states where he had no control. But the leadership of Texas didn't even want to tell the Negroes that they were free. Your thoughts on whether or not this is a celebration or a commemoration, and how we should really treat Juneteenth?
Well, the short answer is yes. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, one or the other. One, it is that the change in legal status should be commemorated, but it should also be celebrated. I don't think we are confined to one or the other. Now, the real issue is what informs our commemoration. Are we clear on the facts and the politics?
Say that now.
Or are we caught up in the myth and the fairy tale of the story as it's been given to us? The truth of the matter is that the proclamation was made in the fall of 1862 to take effect on January 1, 1863. In the Black church, that's where Watch Night comes from. Because those who would be impacted by the effective date of the proclamation kept watch until midnight. That's why we stay in church till 12 o'clock, because our legal status changed. Once we recognize where it fits within history, then we deal with the accountability of how we continue to get hustled, because the law can change on paper and remain the same in practice unless there's going to be enforcement. And that's been the fight since the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. The other part is, if you read it, I don't give the same kind of deference to the pure intentions of President Lincoln. He says it is out of military necessity that he has to issue this proclamation. It's actually in the document. He confesses his soul that the North is about to lose the war, and the young fledgling remainder of this emerging country runs the risk of not only falling to defeat from the Confederate States, but also potential invasion from the foreign powers who still resent the fact that they broke away. So he's in a bit of a crunch, and so he needs some fighters, some folks he can rely upon. In many of the states, had passed laws that persons of African descent could not own weapons under the Second Amendment. There are a number of Supreme Court cases that go back and forth about that. And so he's got to figure out, how do I recruit more soldiers who have capacity, capability, conviction, and courage to be able to help change the trajectory of the nation? So yes, it's a commemoration and a celebration. We commemorate because the proclamation changed the dynamics of the nation's emergence. There's something owed. When we have a reparations conversation, it is not just about the fact that they got free labor. We didn't just save the soul of America, we saved the behind of America, and therefore we ought to have something come back for the sacrifices that have been made. I'm just talking about what I'm talking about. I ain't talking about nobody. And so when we get to that, we then have to ask the question, when we get to Galveston and we've got this field order of 40 acres and a mule, they got a field order, but the Homestead Act of 1862 was legislation. It was law, and it was law that applied all the way up until the late 20th century, where folks could get not 40 acres, but up to 160 acres from the government if they were just going to maintain the land for 5 years and then get a deed to it. So when we start talking about what's our argument, we got to ground our argument in knowing the story, not knowing the myth. But we got to know the history and the documentation so that whoever changes, whoever takes on the banker role in this game called Monopoly, don't hustle us because they think we knew to roll in the dice.
You know, it feels like since Sheila Jackson Lee advanced the legislation and it became a national holiday, that you're right. It should be both, but it does feel more like a barbecue event. It does feel more like a celebration than a commemoration. And the substance of the commemoration is exactly what you said: the 40 acres and a mule, the 100+ acres of land. If you field it for 5 years, it would have put former African slaves in a very, very different position during Reconstruction. And to set the stage for the context, even though it's not tied to the Emancipation Proclamation, or even tied to Juneteenth itself in 1865. When I reflect upon the oration in Rochester, New York, I believe it was, of Frederick Douglass, I think in 1852, on the July 4th of 1852. And he was invited and spoke on July 5th, 1852, about how he felt the invitation to speak on this occasion was a mockery. You know, what to the slave is July 4th? Did you invite me here to mock me? Did you invite me here to make fun of me? Do you think I don't know what, let me bring it to the current times, what Juneteenth means? Do you think that 2 years of free labor beyond the initial proclamation itself, born on the backs of people from 1619, even until that date, is something to have a piece of corn, some collard greens, a piece of fat back, and some ribs about? Or am I righteously indignation when I hear Donald Trump come after diversity, equity, and inclusion, come after HBCUs, come after the Department of Education, come after USAID, come after Social Security and all of the gains that we've made since Second Reconstruction? Righteous indignation is part of that commemoration in your thinking, Dr. Geary?
It better be. And here's why. Unless we've arrived, right here, let's talk about this word emancipation and how many times it is conflicted in the lived experiences of Black people in this country. We've got the Emancipation Proclamation. We have the passage of the 13th Amendment, where the exception clause is part of significant debate, that slavery shall be outlawed in the United States, except in instances of punishment for crime. So your legal status is that if you are convicted of crime under federal law, you are legally a slave. They can get free labor out of you. Convict leasing comes out of it. The state of Alabama, as we learned from a good brother in Montgomery, Brian, brilliant attorney, he tells us that 73% of Alabama's revenue was convict leasing during Reconstruction. So it wasn't just about cotton, it was about government. And so this notion that they're still relying on free labor to keep government, that we have to wrestle with, are we going to give them a pass, or are we going to step up and make sure that lottie-dottie and everybody, as we would say, and I don't mind, listen, I like a good cookout with everybody else. Give me some collard greens and some corn. Make sure you know how to cook the ribs. If you ain't good at the grill, go sit down and you look. And if you can't handle the Kool-Aid, if you can't make red Kool-Aid like it's supposed to be made, look, you just wait off to the side and have your plate in your hand. But once we sit down, what do we discuss over the meal? This ain't Thanksgiving a la 2.0, whatever it is. It has to be a meeting of the minds and the stoking of the courage of the hearts to say, what's the next move to make sure we continue to hold the government accountable until we get not what we want, but what we deserve. And we don't get what we deserve. Reverend has always told us, you don't get what you deserve, you get what you demand and negotiate. And we ain't negotiated no more.
So glad that I'm a part of KBLA Talk 1580. The 4th anniversary events are fast approaching, and seating of all 4 of our special events is getting tight. Please register at KBLA1580.com's website. If not, let me encourage you to stop by and do it right now so you don't get left out. It's our 4th anniversary. Thanks to Tavis Smiley, we have a vehicle by which we can communicate, we can celebrate, and we can commemorate. If you're planning to join us for our 4th anniversary celebration, I'm coming all the way from wherever I will be to be in Los Angeles for that week. We'll have barbecue on Juneteenth holiday. We're asking everyone to bring some food and any amount of money that they can bring, or any grocery store chain or restaurant. Grateful for whatever you can bring us for the families displaced by the wildfires in Altadena. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, more with Dr. S. Todd Yeary on Wealthy Wednesdays on KBLA.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Amber Payton with BIN News Now. An HBCU Hampton University staffer is under investigation after a student posted a video accusing them of demanding sex for grades. Several students spoke anonymously to Wavy News 10, fearing backlash.
I did not want this to tarnish the reputation of the university. I felt like the entire situation was unfortunate.
The university says it's investigating and offering mental health support. Black Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ras Baraka is suing after what he calls his egregious arrest last month outside of an ICE facility. He accuses U.S. Attorney Alina Habba of false arrest, defamation, and acting as a political operative. And Black Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass will not have to testify in a homelessness lawsuit after subpoenas were pulled. The LA Alliance for Human Rights sued the city for allegedly failing to meet a deal requiring nearly 13,000 beds by 2027. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
If former Clippers star Paul George decides to watch the NBA Finals, he can say he was a major factor in the Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers playing for a championship. George was traded by OKC in 2019 to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 5 first-round draft picks. OKC used 2 of those picks to select All-Star guard Jalen Williams and rookie guard Dylan Jones, a key player off the bench for OKC. In 2017, Indiana traded George to OKC for guard Victor Oladipo and center Domantas Sabonis. 2 years later, the Pacers used Sabonis in a trade with Sacramento to get Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton and Gilgeous-Alexander have their teams on the doorstep of an NBA championship. As for George, a 9-time All-Star, he's stuck with the Philadelphia 76ers team that is nowhere close to competing for an NBA title. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, aka the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. After nearly 20 years in Congress, he knows how to get at the issues that matter the most to you. Every day, he takes a deep dive into politics, social justice, and the stories that shape our community. This is where prominent people unpack perplexing problems. Unfiltered, unapologetic, unmissable. You're inside the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA Talk 1580.
Nearly 7 million Americans aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's disease, also known as AD, a type of dementia that affects memory, thinking, and behavior, making everyday tasks challenging. But did you know that Black adults aged 65 and older are twice as likely as white adults to develop AD? There are things you can do to help reduce your risk for developing AD. Managing conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure is crucial. Staying physically active, maintaining social connections, eating a healthy diet, and keeping your mind engaged with activities like reading or puzzles can all contribute to brain health. It's also important to recognize some common signs and symptoms of early AD, such as forgetfulness that causes problems with everyday life, asking the same question a few times in a row, and difficulty concentrating on basic tasks. If you see these signs in yourself or a loved one, don't wait. Early diagnosis and intervention are key to managing AD effectively. To learn more about AD and a potential treatment option, visit treatalzearly.com. That's treatalzearly.com. This message is brought to you by AZI.
LA's newest soul food restaurant is getting spectacular reviews.
Great place with amazing food. The Sunday champagne brunch is fabulous. I saw the place on IG. We tried it for lunch. We were blown away by the food and the service. The restaurant has an inviting atmosphere and a dynamic vibe.
Over the years, Lionel has catered most major Black events in Los Angeles, including all of our KBLA Talk 1580 gatherings. But now he has his own spot, Lionel's Soul Food Cuisine, and you need to check it out at 8501 South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles. Oxtails, baked or fried chicken, meatloaf, turkey chops, pork chops, catfish, short ribs, and all the fixins, collard greens, mac and cheese, yams, red beans, black-eyed peas, and more. And of course, hot water cornbread, satisfying drinks, and delicious desserts. Lionel's is a great place for brunch, lunch, or dinner. If it's good enough for us, it's good enough for you, because we've got your black. So head on over to Lionel's Soul Food Cuisine at 8501 South Vermont Avenue in Los Angeles and tell Lionel you heard about it on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is Reverend Dr. Attorney S. Todd Yeary, 1 foot in the pulpit, 1 foot in the courtroom. He's our special guest regularly on Wealthy Wednesdays with S. Todd Yeary on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Dr. Yeary, welcome forward.
I appreciate hanging out with you. You give me better than I deserve, my brother.
No, you're the best. Listen, I want to be clear, and then I want you to share with us your thoughts on executive orders like the Emancipation Proclamation. They do have the power to set lots of people free. Whatever they become over history, they do mean something. Japanese internment, the Manhattan Project. While I understand that the pardon process itself is unfettered and unique to the President of the United States, ultimately, Jesse Jr., what are you saying? Well, this is what I'm saying. Forgiveness in the Constitution must become democratized. The Black community deserves forgiveness for the mistakes that we've made. And by that, I mean not the institution of slavery and all that racism has represented to us over years and decades, over centuries. I'm saying that those of us who sold drugs, those of us who had a DUI, those of us who made mistakes along the way, and after our mistakes, we have to relive them because we're not pardoned. It's almost like the full, complete, unconditional, absolute pardon. I wouldn't be surprised, other than Mrs. Johnson over at the White House, who works now as the pardon czar. Man, she might be the only Black person in American history to ever get one of those. That's different than a commutation. That's different than sentence reduction. That's different than a half a pardon. I'm talking about the thing that he gave his son, Hunter Biden, full, absolute, complete. The democratization, not necessarily of the pardon process, which should be better regulated, even though it's his decision, but the democratization of forgiveness. It just seems to me that it belongs to everybody, since Jesus of Nazareth himself, Dr. Yeary, was responsible for bringing it forward 2,000 years ago, and governments all around the world have tried their best to duplicate the power of that forgiveness by giving it to a king, by giving it to a pharaoh, by giving it to a president. It seemingly never gets democratized. It belongs to everyone. Dr. Yeary?
All right, so you all up in my closing remarks, and so I can't. It's not time for the sermon. We ain't had this.
That's another segment.
Listen. So I can't sing the hymn, Father, I stretch my hands to thee. We can't do that just yet. We got to hold off a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about the meaning of democracy, because I think we operate out of this sense that we have the same definition to terms, and they operate differently depending on who you are. So restitution for some looks a whole lot different than restitution for others. You mentioned some folks get pardoned, some folks get commutation. They do not mean the same thing, even though they operate functionally out of the same authority and power of the president. And so when we talk about what the country's commitment is, the reason I don't expect the country to get the notion of forgiveness is because this country ain't figured out contrition. So if they can't see the speck in their own eye, right? Why do we keep relying on them to keep pointing to us about what's wrong with us? They will diagnose us, but they won't redeem us. They won't tell us the truth. They won't give us the same access to justice. Even in how they frame the conversation. This is not a government that's committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let's pack up the Statue of Liberty and send her back to France. Because give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses longing to be free. That whole frame is where out of e pluribus unum, out of many one. Take it off the back of your negotiated tender that's really just cheap paper made out of fiber that has no value except to create a modicum of exchange that allows you to exploit some to the benefit of others. Let's just talk about it. So, and look, don't get me wrong, y'all. The cookout, if I could get on an airplane, I'd be coming, have my fat back ready. I like the hard part because I can suck on it. It does something for me. But it's got to be more than getting together to eat, to laugh, to joke, to play cards, to play dominoes, and then get sleepy
or shoot somebody.
Well, we
have a little in Chicago, man.
We try
not to becomes a whole nother thing, man.
Listen. Don't sit outside at the cookout. Grab your plate and keep moving because you don't know what's moving around. That's all I'm saying. So we got to make sure we're operating out of the same contextual understanding. That's why it is so critical that we stop making these assumptions. It doesn't matter who the party is. They both have pimped us at some point throughout our history. At the end of the day, the system is rotten. It's not a particular party. Even scripture tells us a little leaven leavens the whole loaf. And so we keep trying to contain this cancer instead of trying to cut it out, so we can finally get to a place of wholeness and healing that benefits everybody, not just a handful of a few. And so that's our fundamental question at our core, is we keep trying to hold this thing together with Band-Aids and masking tape, hoping that somehow or other we can create some sort of morally driven, clearly focused, operative government that models for the world what it demands from the world.
Let me ask you this question in the final 2 minutes before we go back to the break, and then I'm going to leave a large section of that last quarter of the program for your opine and for a word of hope. It seems to me that the Negro was responsible for the American experiment itself. That this tape, this Band-Aid, this thing that we have to keep gluing together for America, that there is no other experiment like it in the world. At the end of all of our complaints, America is unique in human history. We've got a better chance here than going somewhere else or building something somewhere else differently. Help me reconcile that, Dr. Urey, with the minute and a half that we have before the break.
So I think that assessment is based on current conditions. And it's also based on our ignorance of what is the qualitative difference in other parts of the world. If it is materialism, then certainly the answer is yes. But if you visit any other place in the world that is not as affluent as the United States, I believe you find a qualitative difference in terms of how the government and the society interacts around common humanity. The United States is unique. And it's unique because it has built itself around the exploitation of those who have only tried to show the elites some goodwill. The indigenous Americans, we would call them, they tried to show hospitality. They said when the pilgrims arrived, the indigenous people had the land, and the visitors had the Bible. And after a little while, they had the Bible and the indigenous people had the land. I'm going to get to that in the sermon, because we keep thinking that somehow or other in God we trust means that we're talking about the same God and we're talking about the same kind of trust. We've got to get back to making sure that we are clear. One, what are we meaning by the words that we're using? What definitions are we applying, and how does it inform our praxis, how we live it out and make demands? And then we can say and sit down with our colleagues, are we really having a conversation, or do you just not understand what we're talking about?
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. It's Wealthy Wednesdays with Dr. S. Todd Yeary, and I can't wait for the sermon when we return. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. when we come right back on KBLA.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
Attention Los Angeles County renters and landlords. Starting January 1st, 2025, there are new rules limiting rent increases for rent-stabilized units in unincorporated LA County. Most rent-stabilized units will have rent increases capped at 2.565% from January through June 2025, with exceptions for qualified small property landlords and luxury units. To learn more about the new changes, visit rent.lacounty.gov. This message is brought to you by Los Angeles County Department of Consumer and Business Affairs.
Hi, I'm LA City Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to join us on Saturday, June the 14th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. as we cut the ribbon on the brand new Enel Woods Park at 8703 South McKinley Avenue. Thanks to a generous donation from Heal the Bay, the park features smart irrigation, stormwater capture systems, and space for local wildlife to thrive. And we've built a walking trail, picnic areas, native landscaping, and quiet spaces for families to gather, relax, and connect. This is part of a much larger effort to expand green spaces across South LA, with 3 new parks in the works, a first-of-its-kind community center coming soon, and plans to connect it all through the South LA Greenway. So mark your calendar for Saturday, June 14th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and come celebrate a greener, stronger South LA at Enel Woods Park. I'm also pleased to sponsor the Climate Justice Plus Black Health Symposium, moderated by Tavis Smiley, live on C-SPAN, Wednesday, June the 18th, from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. Just a reminder to sign up right away at the KBLA1580.com website to join me, Mayor Karen Bass, Congresswoman Sidney Kamlager-Dove, Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson, Dr. Cornel West, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., the Sierra Club's Ben Jealous, and other Black influencers in the climate and health fields, as we continue to amplify the connection between climate and poor health outcomes for our people. Thank you for listening. I'm Councilman Curran Price.
Wesley Financial Group is not a law firm.
Hi, I'm Chuck McDowell, the timeshare cancellation guy and founder of Wesley Financial Group. And I want to set the record straight. I am not an attorney. I've never wanted to be an attorney. And the truth is, I really don't even like attorneys. If I sound like an attorney, I apologize. But what I've learned in my 15 years in the timeshare cancellation business is you don't need to be an attorney to get folks out of their timeshare. At Wesley, we've helped over 40,000 families cancel their timeshare. And I want to share with you how we do it. Just give my office a call. I guarantee if we take you as a client, we'll get you out of your timeshare or you'll pay nothing. Attorneys, this was meant to be funny, so please don't sue me, especially my friend Kenneth from Black River Falls, Wisconsin.
Call now for your free timeshare exit info kit. 800-857-8866. 800-857-8866. 800-857-8866.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. Every girl deserves a chance to shine. That's the belief behind Forgiving for Living, Inc. Since 1999, this organization has been empowering at-risk girls ages 13 to 18, helping them overcome behavioral and mental health challenges. Founder Wendy Gladney's personal journey inspired the mission to give girls hope and purpose through the power of forgiveness. Through their ambassador program, workshops, and annual annual conference, Forgiving for Living has touched over 3,000 young lives, providing mentoring, life skills, training, and tools for building self-esteem and confidence. You can make a difference. Visit forgivingforliving.org to donate, volunteer, become a mentor, or find help for a young girl in need. Forgiving for Living, Inc., building brighter futures for young girls. Visit forgivingforliving.org today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. We have had on our program for the last hour Dr. S. Todd Eury. Dr. Eury has 1 foot in the pulpit, 1 foot in the courtroom, but both feet in reality. So grateful, Dr. Eury, that you're joining us once again on your Wealthy Wednesday show on Jesse Jackson Jr.
Well, it's only, quote, my show because of your generosity and your vision. And so I applaud your willingness to have a candid conversation about truth telling and do it in open spaces. That way we can deal with reality and not keep playing with this fiction called the mythology of making America great again.
Can I make two basic points before you share with us a word of hope? First, Karine Jean-Pierre has a new book called Independent. I am going to reach out to the former press secretary of the president of the former president to invite her to be a guest on our show. For 3.5 years, she told us everything was all right. But just a few months after having left the Biden White House, she says she no longer wants to be a Democrat. Now, that book that she has written is being referred to as very hard-hitting, but also a soft and gentle touch. Karine Jean-Pierre is someone that I'm going to reach out to on our program. We've already had Jonathan Allen with his book Fight, and we're going to reach out hopefully this week to Jake Tapper to see if Jake Tapper will come on our program to talk about Original Sin. And I want to share this right here with Tavis Smiley. Whoever that timeshare commercial guy is that we just heard a few moments ago, I want him on my program. I would love for him to be a regular because and he sounds like David Whitman from the D White Man, David Whitman from the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And I really would like to ask him some questions about what white folks are thinking, not only in timeshares, but around the country. But he's definitely got the voice to communicate the message. Dr. Eury, all jokes aside, we're living in very difficult times. People are feeling some kind of way about where the Trump administration is going. Today, the Democratic Party has parked a taco truck in front of the Republican National Committee, making fun and poking the bear, as Nina Turner and Cornel West spoke about just before we began our program. Seems to be kind of petty, kind of running for class president in 8th grade. It just doesn't seem to be the kind of response that resonates with the resistance movement, given all that's at stake. share with us a word of hope and help lift our spirits.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, you often say I've got one foot in the courtroom, one foot in the pulpit. The church where I am privileged to serve as pastor is not across the street from the courthouse. They're in totally different neighborhoods. The realities look very different. However, the people that are frequenting the courthouses around the country very often look like you and me, because the system wasn't designed for us. It was designed on us. And so we have to understand the context. When Karine Jean-Pierre is saying she's leaving the Democratic Party, what she's actually doing is embracing what we know from the Kerner report. The Kerner report was real clear that we've got to stop this sloganism issue around Black power. It's not enough to have a chant. You have to have a plan. And part of the plan is, and they define it actually in the Kerner report, is the ability to swing the outcome of an election. Well, if you're going to get basically variations of the same thing from the primary process of the two major political parties, then I think what you do is you opt out. I think this is a very real consideration. Third party doesn't really help us in grounding the competitive nature. But if you're going to swing the outcome of the election, then let the people who are going to fight over the foolishness of primary pandering decide who's going to be the candidate. And then once they know who the competitors are, then come back and play to the independents so that we can set the agenda, because we then get to determine the outcome of the election. That's the definition of power that you find in the Kerner report. But the other part is, and this is where I will leave it, Sunday is on the calendar as the day of Pentecost. It's the observance in the Christian faith of the formalizing of what we would call the birth of the church. But let me put it in a little different context. The day of Pentecost, folks begin to hear the communication of good news in their own language. It is actually the remedying of what happened at the Tower of Babel. That when you had this design that folks could build a ladder, get to heaven, be just like God and look God in the face, that there was a confusing of the language where you could not communicate with the rest of the world. And we know the joke that if you speak two languages, you're bilingual. If you speak three or more languages, you're multilingual. If you speak one language, you're an American. We're not able to communicate with the world. We have isolated. We found ourselves isolated because we operate out of this notion of sovereignty that gives us the authority to rule and lord over others in ways that has not been seen in human history. And so when we come to the day of Pentecost, at a time when this political process is endorsed by a version of Christianity that Christ himself would not recognize, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the day of Pentecost really all about? It is not about the gospel, the being definite article. It is about a peculiar gospel, this gospel, the gospel that requires us to take care of the needs of those who have no food, have no water, have no housing, have no clothing, because it is in that manner that we demonstrate the fruit that establishes who we are. And what we find is there's a living contradiction in the silence, the deafening silence of what's coming out of the evangelical movement, that you're going to take away and punish poor people simply for being poor, that you're going to say people who look a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way, love a certain way, don't have a place, that we have a problem here. Pentecost changes the narrative so that we can communicate to one another and with one another in love. It's not the gospel, it's this gospel. And then it's not the church. Jesus says to Peter, upon this rock, I will build my church. We've got to make sure that we imitate and replicate the model that Jesus has set forth and change the world without apology, because we do what we do and we do it the way we're supposed to do it. And we keep doing it until we get what we demand.
Dr. Uri, we are wealthier this Wednesday. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good to be with you.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show on KBLA. We are so much wealthier because Dr. Uri grounds us in the middle of our week so that we can make it through the end of the week and on to another. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Until tomorrow, we will have Dr. Willie Gable, who will share with us his thoughts on redemption and forgiveness. Until next time.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN.